My wife's therapy session was accidentally live-streamed to our family group chat, and I discovered she's been lying about everything for 8 years. Our anniversary was yesterday. The messages started coming in during my lunch break. My phone vibrating so hard it walked across the table. 37 notifications in 2 minutes. I picked it up expecting birthday plans for my nephew or someone's engagement announcement. Instead, I saw my mother-in-law had sent 11 crying emojis. My brother wrote, "Holy shit, dude, are you seeing this?" My sister sent, "Call me right now." I opened the family group chat named the Kennedys after our last name and saw a video link from an account I didn't recognize. The preview showed my wife Lillian sitting in what looked like a therapist's office. My stomach dropped before I even pressed play. The video was live. Had been streaming for 18 minutes already. 43 people were watching. I recognized the office. Lillian had been going to therapy every Thursday at 3 for the past 6 months. Said she was working through anxiety about her job. I'd encouraged it, paid for it, drove her there twice when her car was in the shop. Now her therapy session was broadcasting to my entire extended family, and I had no idea how or why. I put in my earbuds, turned the volume up. The therapist was speaking. Her name was Dr. Okoye. I'd met her once when I picked Lillian up early. Professional, kind. She was asking Lillian about something called maintaining the narrative. Lillian's voice came through clearly. She said she'd been doing fine keeping everything separate, that I didn't suspect anything. That the hardest part was remembering which version of events she'd told which people. My hands started shaking. The phone almost slipped. I caught it, kept watching, needed to understand what I was hearing. The video quality was crystal clear, too clear. I could see every detail of the office. The diplomas on the wall behind Dr. Okoye, the box of tissues on the side table, Lillian's wedding ring catching the light, my wedding ring, the one I'd saved for 6 months to buy. She was twisting it while she talked. A nervous habit I'd found endearing. Now it looked like guilt. Dr. Okoye leaned forward and asked Lillian to describe a typical week, how she managed the logistics. Lillian pulled out a notebook, started explaining her system. Mondays and Tuesdays she spent with me. Told Nathan she was working late on a project. Wednesdays she'd go to Nathan's place after telling me she had client dinners. Thursdays were therapy and alternated who she stayed with. Fridays through Sundays rotated weekly. She had it mapped out like a business schedule, color-coded, cross-referenced with both our work calendars to avoid conflicts. Dr. Okoye asked about close calls, times when the system almost failed. Lillian laughed again, that same laugh that used to make me smile. She said there had been dozens. Last Christmas, I'd wanted to surprise her at work with lunch. She'd seen me in the parking lot and pretended to be on an important call, waved me away. I'd left the lunch on her desk and gone home feeling like a good husband. She'd actually been panicking because Nathan was inside waiting for her. They'd hidden in a conference room until I left. She'd told him a former student was stalking her. He'd wanted to call security. She'd convinced him it was handled. Both of us had believed her completely. The family chat was exploding with reactions. My cousin was typing in all caps. My aunt kept sending prayer hands. Nobody knew what to say. Dr. Okoye's expression shifted. She looked uncomfortable now, asked Lillian why she'd chosen this method to reveal everything. Why not tell us privately? Lillian's response made my blood go cold. She said she'd tried writing letters, tried planning meetings, could never go through with it. The fear of our reactions paralyzed her. So she decided to remove the choice, make it impossible to back out, stream it live so there was no taking it back, no changing her mind. She said it was the only way she could be honest. By removing her own escape route. Dr. Okoye looked like she wanted to stop the session, looked at the camera, seemed to just notice it was there, asked if Lillian had disclosed this recording. Lillian said she had, said she'd signed releases for educational purposes. Dr. Okoye's face went white. She'd been lied to as well, used as a prop in Lillian's confession without informed consent. Dr. Okoye asked how long Lillian had been maintaining 2 separate lives. Lillian said 8 years, since before we got married. The therapist asked if she felt guilty. Lillian laughed, actually laughed, said guilt implied she thought she was doing something wrong, that she'd built something sustainable, that plenty of people did this, it was just about compartmentalization. I watched my wife, the woman I'd woken up next to that morning, explain to her therapist that our entire marriage had been a performance. The messages in the family chat were multiplying. My dad sent, "Turn it off, someone turn it off." But nobody knew how. The stream kept going. Lillian told Dr. Okoye about our anniversary dinner the night before, how I'd made reservations at the restaurant where we had our first date, how I'd given her a bracelet with our wedding date engraved on it, how she'd cried and told me she loved me. The therapist asked if any of that was real. Lillian paused, said the tears were real because she'd been thinking about how complicated everything had become, that she did love me in a way, just not the way I thought, not the way a wife should love a husband. The phone slipped from my hand, clattered on the break room table. Someone from accounting looked over. I grabbed it. Walked outside. Needed air. The video kept playing. Dr. Okoye was asking about the other relationship. the primary relationship, as she called it. Lillian said his name was Nathan, that they'd been together for 9 years, that he didn't know about me either, that she'd built 2 complete lives and managed to keep them separate through careful scheduling and a lot of lies. She traveled for work frequently, or that's what both of us thought. Really, she was alternating between 2 homes, 2 complete existences. When she told me she was on a business trip, she was with him. When she told him she was visiting her sick mother, she was with me. My brother called. I didn't answer. Couldn't speak. Kept watching. The therapist asked about the mechanics, how Lillian kept track of everything. Lillian pulled out her phone, showed the therapist an app, color-coded calendars, 1 blue for me, 1 green for Nathan, 1 red for her actual work obligations. She'd been using project management software to manage 2 marriages, because that's what she called it, 2 marriages, even though only mine was legal. She'd had a commitment ceremony with Nathan 3 years ago. Small thing in Vermont. Her family thought she was at a work conference. My family had never heard of Nathan. Most of her friends didn't know I existed. Dr. Okoye asked about the decision to livestream. That's when I learned it wasn't an accident. Lillian had done this intentionally. She'd created a private account, posted the link to the family group chat, and scheduled it to go live during her session. Said she was tired of managing everything, that this was the only way to tell everyone at once. That she'd planned it for weeks. Our anniversary had been deliberate too. 1 last nice memory before destroying everything. The therapist looked uncomfortable, asked if Lillian had considered the impact. Lillian said she had, said it was necessary, said both families deserved to know the truth simultaneously so she couldn't be accused of playing favorites. The stream ended. 49 minutes total. I stood in the parking lot holding my phone like it might explode. The family chat was chaos. Over 200 messages. My mom wanted to know if I was okay. My uncle was asking who Nathan was. My cousin had apparently done a Google search and found Nathan's social media. Posted screenshots. Nathan looked like me. Same height, same build, same dark hair. We could have been brothers. He was a high school teacher. Had posted a photo 3 days ago celebrating his anniversary with Lillian. 8 years together, he'd written. The same length as our marriage. She'd apparently married both of us within months of each other. I called my sister. She answered on the first ring. Asked if I was safe. If I was going to do something stupid. I told her I was fine. A lie. She said she'd watched the whole stream. That 30 people from our family had seen it. That my mom was crying. That my dad was threatening to go to Lillian's therapy office. I asked if she'd known anything. She said no. Nobody had suspected. Lillian had been perfect. The ideal wife. Family dinners. Holiday cards. She'd remembered everyone's birthdays. Volunteered at my nephew's school. There had been no signs. Or there had been signs, and we'd all missed them. The second stream started an hour later. Different link, different chat. This one went to Nathan's family. I shouldn't have watched. Couldn't help myself. Lillian was still in the therapy office. Dr. Okoye looked exhausted. Lillian was explaining to Nathan's family about me, about our marriage, about the house we owned together, about the life she'd built with me while simultaneously building one with Nathan. She was crying now, saying she loved them both, that she'd never meant to hurt anyone, that the situation had gotten out of control, that she'd tried to end it multiple times but couldn't choose. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. It was Nathan. His voice was shaking. He asked if I was the other husband. I said I was the legal husband. He said he'd been with her longer. I said I had the marriage certificate. We sat in silence for 30 seconds. Then he asked if I'd known. I said no. He said he hadn't either. He asked if we should meet. I said probably. He said he'd text me. He hung up. I sat in my car, tried to remember the last 8 years, tried to find the moment where I should have known. Came up empty. She'd been flawless, never slipped, never contradicted herself. I'd trusted her completely. The evidence was everywhere once I started looking. Old texts I'd dismissed, weekend trips that lasted exactly 3 days, her phone always face down, the way she'd compartmentalized her social media. I'd thought she was private. Turns out she had separate accounts, one for my world, one for Nathan's. Neither of us had seen the full picture. Her co-workers knew about both of us, thought we knew about each other. Thought she was polyamorous with full disclosure. She'd told them we were all in agreement. They'd been posting supportive comments about her unconventional relationship for years. I found the accounts that night, read through hundreds of posts. She'd been documenting the whole thing. Careful to never post photos that would identify either household. But the stories were there, both of us, living parallel lives. I went home, our home, the house we'd bought 4 years ago. She wasn't there, hadn't been there since the live stream. Her car was gone. I walked through the rooms trying to see them differently. The guest bedroom she used as an office, the locked filing cabinet I'd never questioned, the closet that was always organized perfectly, the separate credit card she said was for her personal expenses. Every detail that had seemed normal now looked like infrastructure for deception. I found the spare phone in her nightstand, powered it on, passcode protected. I tried our anniversary, wrong. Tried her birthday, wrong. Tried Nathan's birthday, which I'd learned from his social media. It unlocked. 200 unread texts from him, asking where she was, if she was safe, saying he loved her, saying they'd figure this out together. The phone contained an entire relationship I'd never known about. Photos of them together. At restaurants I recognized. Dates when she'd told me she was working late. Weekend trips when she'd told me she was visiting her mother. I scrolled back months, years, found their first messages from 9 years ago. She'd been dating both of us simultaneously from the start. Had met Nathan 2 weeks before she met me. There was no primary relationship. We'd both been equal deceptions, equal performances. I found voice memos she'd sent him, her voice soft and loving, saying things she'd said to me, the same pet names, the same promises. She'd been recycling intimacy, using the same script for both of us. The filing cabinet keys were in her jewelry box. I'd never looked there, never had a reason to. Now I opened everything. Found files labeled with both our names, mine in blue folders, Nathan's in green, documentation of our entire lives, copies of my pay stubs, my credit reports, my social security card. She'd had everything she needed to steal my identity from day one. Nathan's file was identical. She'd been systematically collecting information on both of us. Planning ahead. The files went back to the beginning of both relationships. This wasn't impulse. This was premeditation. Years of careful planning before she'd ever needed to use any of it. I found a journal buried at the bottom of the cabinet. Purple leather, her handwriting. I sat on the floor and read it cover to cover. She'd been documenting both relationships like a researcher. Clinical observations, what worked, what didn't. Which lies were most believable, which stories she could repeat. There were practice scripts, ways to deflect questions about her schedule, tactics for managing suspicion. She'd written out entire conversations before having them, had rehearsed our life together. One entry from 3 years ago talked about how exhausting it was, how she sometimes forgot which version of herself she was supposed to be, how she'd almost called me Nathan twice in 1 week. But then she wrote about how alive it made her feel, how powerful, being two different people, making two men love her completely. She'd been addicted to the deception itself. My sister arrived unannounced, let herself in with the spare key I'd given her years ago, found me sitting on the floor surrounded by files and the journal. She didn't say anything, just sat down next to me, put her arm around me. We stayed like that for an hour. Finally, she asked if I wanted her to take the journal, said I didn't need to read more, that I knew enough. I said I needed to understand, needed to see all of it. She said understanding wouldn't make it hurt less. I said it might make it make sense. She said some things didn't make sense, some things were just cruel. She took the journal anyway, said she'd keep it safe if I wanted it later. That I should eat something, sleep, take care of myself. I nodded. Didn't do any of those things, just kept searching, kept finding more evidence of the life I'd thought was real. My dad came over, brought my brother. They didn't ask questions, just sat with me. My dad had been married to my mom for 38 years. He kept shaking his head, saying he didn't understand, how someone could do this. My brother asked if I needed a lawyer. I said probably. He called his friend who practiced family law. Got me an appointment for the next morning. They stayed until midnight. Made sure I ate. Made sure I wasn't alone. I appreciated it. Also wanted them gone. Wanted to sit in the wreckage by myself, process what my life had become. The next morning, I met with the lawyer. Her name was Francine Volkov. She'd already heard about my case. Said it was unprecedented, that she'd never seen anything like it. Asked for details. I told her everything, the 8-year marriage, the live stream, Nathan, the dual lives. She took notes, asked if we had shared assets. I said yes. House, cars, bank accounts. She asked if Lillian had access to everything. I said yes. She told me to freeze the accounts immediately, check credit reports, secure anything valuable. I hadn't thought about that. Hadn't thought about protecting myself financially, still thinking like a husband instead of a victim. The credit report arrived that afternoon. 3 cards I didn't know about, all maxed. Total debt of $82,000, all in my name. She'd opened them, using my information, had been paying minimum balances from an account I didn't know existed. I called the banks, reported fraud. They said they'd investigate, asked if I wanted to press charges. I said I'd get back to them, called Francine. She said this was identity theft, separate from the divorce, criminal charges possible. I sat with that information. My wife had committed multiple felonies against me, while telling me she loved me, while planning anniversary dinners. Nathan called again, said we needed to talk. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop halfway between our houses. Neutral territory. I got there first. He arrived 10 minutes late. We recognized each other immediately from our respective social media stalking. He sat down across from me. We stared at each other, both seeing the reflection of our situation. Finally, he said this was fucked up. I agreed. He asked what I knew. I told him about the 8 years, the marriage, the house, the identity theft. He went pale, said she'd borrowed $60,000 from him over the years, for her mother's medical bills. Her mother was fine, lived in Florida, played golf 3 times a week. We'd been funding something. Neither of us knew what. He pulled out his phone, showed me photos I'd never seen. Lillian at a beach house I'd never been to. Lillian with friends I'd never met. A whole social circle that existed separate from both of us. He'd found them after the live stream, started asking questions. These people knew her as Lindsay. Different name, different backstory. She'd told them she worked in marketing, traveled constantly for work. They'd never questioned why she was always alone, never met a boyfriend or husband, thought she was married to her career. Nathan had tracked down 3 of them. They'd all confirmed the same story. Lindsay was independent, successful, kept her personal life private. They'd respected that, never pushed, never suspected they were part of a third fabricated existence. I showed him the journal, watched his face as he read her clinical observations about managing us. He stopped halfway through, said he couldn't read more, asked if she'd written about loving either of us. I said no, just tactical notes. Strategy. He looked sick, asked if I thought any of it had been real. I said I didn't know if she was capable of real. He said he'd proposed 6 times, meant it every time, planned a future. She'd said yes every time, then found excuses. Too much work stress, family drama she needed to resolve, wanted to wait until they'd saved more money. He'd believed her. Thought they were building towards something. Now he knew he'd been building alone. She'd been performing, running out the clock, keeping him invested while maintaining me as backup. Or maybe I was the backup. Maybe neither of us had been primary. Maybe we'd both been equally disposable. We traded more details. I told him about the filing cabinet, the color-coded folders, the stolen documents. He told me she'd taken out life insurance policies on both of us. He'd discovered it when sorting through the papers she'd left at his place. We were each worth $500,000. She was the beneficiary. I felt cold. Asked if he thought she'd planned to kill us. He said he didn't know, hoped not. But the policies were real. Dated back 3 years. We sat with that. The possibility that we'd been worth more dead than alive. That the woman we'd loved had potentially been planning our murders, or maybe just keeping options open. Either way, it was disturbing. We agreed to tell Detective Park, add it to the growing list of crimes. We compared stories for 2 hours. The overlaps were disturbing. She'd told us both she was allergic to shellfish. Neither of us had ever seen her have a reaction. She'd told us both her father died when she was 16. Her father was alive, commented on her Facebook posts regularly. She'd told us both she'd miscarried before we met, making her hesitant about trying again. Neither of us knew if that was true. She'd used the same trauma to manipulate both of us, the same vulnerability to build trust. Nathan had proposed to her 6 times. She'd said yes every time, then found reasons to delay. The ceremony in Vermont had been his condition for staying together. She'd agreed, married him without legal paperwork, kept her options open. We found 15 major lies, probably hundreds of smaller ones. She'd told me she was an only child, told him she had 3 siblings. Both stories were false. She had 1 brother, lived in Oregon. We called him. He'd met neither of us, didn't know she was married to anyone, was shocked to learn about both relationships, said she'd told the family she was focusing on her career, that she'd dated casually, but nothing serious. He'd invited her to his wedding 5 years ago. She'd declined, said work was too busy. She'd been on our honeymoon. Nathan and I sat with that. We'd both had honeymoons with her. Different years, different destinations, same woman, same lies. The credit card charges told another story. Francine's investigator pulled records. Lillian had been spending money neither of us knew about. High-end hotels, expensive restaurants, shopping in cities where neither of us lived. She'd been taking solo trips, actual ones, without either of us, living a third life we hadn't known about. The investigator found photos, social media accounts under different names. She'd been dating other people, casually, through apps, telling them she was single. We weren't even her only deceptions, just the 2 she'd maintained longest, the most elaborate, the ones she'd built infrastructure around. The investigator's name was Gordon Pratt, former FBI, specialized in financial crimes. He'd found patterns in Lillian's spending that revealed the third life in detail, hotel stays in Chicago every 6 weeks. Same hotel, same room type. He'd contacted the concierge. They remembered her, knew her as Linda. She'd been seeing someone, a stockbroker named Julian. Gordon had tracked him down, called him. Julian had been shocked, said he'd been dating Linda for 2 years. Casual relationship. She'd told him she traveled for work, was never available for more than a weekend at a time. He'd thought she was married, to her job maybe. Never suspected she had 2 actual husbands. Gordon asked if Julian had given her money. He had. $20,000 over 2 years, for various emergencies. Her car breaking down, medical expenses, a legal issue with a former employer. All lies, all variations on the same con. Julian was victim number 3. Gordon found 2 more. A pilot named Richard in Atlanta, an architect named David in Seattle. Same pattern. Casual relationships, weekend visits, borrowed money, lies about her life. She'd been running a rotation. 2 serious relationships with me and Nathan, 3 casual ones with Julian, Richard, and David. All of us isolated. None of us knowing about the others. The total money she'd extracted from all 5 of us was over $200,000. Gordon still hadn't found where it went. No large purchases in her name. No property, no investments. The money had vanished into accounts he couldn't trace yet. He said she might have been sending it overseas, might have been planning an exit strategy, might have been preparing to disappear and start over somewhere new with a clean slate and $250,000 in cash. I'd sat in Francine's office while Gordon presented his findings. Felt numb. 5 men, 5 separate deceptions. I'd thought Nathan and I were unique, special in our shared trauma. Turned out we were just the most committed victims, the ones she'd invested the most time in. Richard and David had been contacted by police. Both were cooperating. Both were humiliated. Julian was considering legal action. We'd formed an accidental support group. 5 men comparing notes on the woman who'd conned us all. The police had added the other men to the case. More counts of fraud, more theft. The prosecution was building an overwhelming case. Lillian's lawyer had tried to negotiate a plea deal. Prosecutor refused, said this was too big, too public, too calculated. She'd go to trial, face everything. Nathan and I filed police reports together, coordinated our statements. The detective was a woman named Lisa Park. She'd worked fraud for 15 years. Said this was unusual. Most bigamy cases involved quick marriages for immigration or financial benefit. This was sustained deception across years, required significant planning. She asked what we wanted. Nathan said he wanted his money back. I said I wanted her prosecuted. Detective Park said both were possible. Asked if we'd heard from Lillian. We hadn't. She'd disappeared after the live streams. Phone off. Not at her office. Not at either home. Her parents claimed they didn't know where she was. Detective Park said she'd issue a warrant if Lillian didn't surface within 48 hours. My mom came over with groceries, made me eat, asked how I was doing. I said I was fine. She said I was allowed to not be fine, that my wife had betrayed me in ways she couldn't comprehend, that I needed to process that. I said I was processing. Just doing it while handling practical matters. She hugged me, said she loved me, said the family was there for whatever I needed. I appreciated it. Also felt humiliated. My entire family had watched my wife explain how she'd been lying to me, how I'd been too stupid to notice. My mom seemed to read my mind, said this wasn't my fault, that Lillian was a skilled manipulator, that I couldn't have known. I wanted to believe her. My family had been traumatized too. My dad had stopped sleeping. My mom said he'd wake up at 3 a.m. and sit in the living room. Just sitting, thinking about how someone could be that cruel. My sister had started seeing a therapist. Said watching the live stream had shaken her faith in her own judgment. If I could be fooled that completely, how did she know she wasn't being fooled? Her husband had to keep reassuring her he wasn't hiding anything, that their marriage was real. The paranoia had spread through my family like a virus, everyone questioning everything. My cousin had confronted her boyfriend about a work trip, accused him of lying. He'd shown her emails, calendar invites, hotel receipts. She'd still been suspicious. Lillian had poisoned trust beyond just her victims, had contaminated everyone adjacent to the situation. My aunt had organized a family dinner 2 months after the live stream, insisted everyone come, said we needed to heal together. I hadn't wanted to go, didn't want to be the center of attention. The cautionary tale. Sophie had encouraged me to go, said family was important, that isolation would make it worse. So I'd gone. Sat at my aunt's dining table, surrounded by relatives who'd watched my humiliation broadcast live. Nobody knew what to say. My uncle tried to make a joke, something about always thinking Lillian was too good to be true. Nobody laughed. My sister kicked him under the table. My mom changed the subject, asked about my work. I'd given generic answers, felt myself retreating, wanting to leave. My nephew, 10 years old, had asked if I was sad. Simple question. Child's honesty. I'd said yes. Very sad. He'd asked if it would get better. I'd said I hope so. He'd nodded, seemed satisfied with that, went back to his food. His simple acceptance had helped more than all the adult platitudes. The dinner had ended early. Nobody had the energy to pretend everything was normal. Driving home, I'd realized my family was grieving too. They'd loved Lillian. Welcomed her. Thought of her as family. Finding out she'd been performing had devastated them. My mom had lost a daughter-in-law she'd treasured. My dad had lost someone he'd trusted. My sister had lost a friend. They'd all lost the version of me who'd been happy, who'd had a wife and a future. That version was gone, replaced by this damaged, suspicious shell. They were mourning multiple losses. I'd been so focused on my own pain I hadn't considered theirs. We were all victims, just in different ways. The news picked up the story 3 days later. Local station first, then regional, then national. Woman maintains 2 marriages simultaneously for 8 years, reveals everything via live-streamed therapy sessions. The comments were brutal. People calling me stupid, asking how I didn't notice, speculating about my intelligence, my manhood. Nathan got similar treatment. We'd become national jokes, the men too dumb to realize they were sharing a wife. Late-night shows made jokes, social media memes, our faces plastered everywhere. I stopped going outside, had groceries delivered, took leave from work, couldn't face people, couldn't face the questions. Lillian's lawyer reached out, wanted to negotiate. I told Francine absolutely not, that Lillian could talk to the police, to the courts, not to me. The lawyer sent a letter anyway. Lillian was in a psychiatric facility, voluntary admission, being treated for dissociative identity disorder, claiming she'd created elaborate fantasies to cope with childhood trauma, that she hadn't meant to hurt anyone, that she'd been mentally ill and needed treatment, not punishment. Francine said it was a defense strategy. That Lillian was building an insanity plea, that we should proceed with charges anyway. I agreed. Nathan hesitated, said maybe she really was sick. I said sick people could still commit crimes. He eventually agreed. The investigator found more. A storage unit rented under a fake name, filled with stuff from both households, things I'd thought we'd donated, things Nathan had thought were at his place. She'd been stealing from both of us. Small items, sentimental things, his grandmother's watch, my father's cufflinks, photo albums, letters. She'd been collecting evidence of both lives. The investigator thought maybe she'd planned to tell us eventually, that the storage unit was her backup plan, her proof that both relationships were real. I didn't know what was worse, that she'd stolen our memories, or that she'd been planning this reveal for years. Her co-workers were interviewed by police, confirmed they'd known about both relationships, thought it was consensual polyamory. Lillian had told them we'd all met, that we'd agreed to the arrangement, that we were modern and evolved. They'd believed her, had complimented her communication skills, her ability to maintain healthy boundaries. One co-worker said Lillian had given a presentation at work about ethical non-monogamy, had used our situation as a case study. Without our knowledge, without our consent, she'd been profiting professionally from our deception, teaching others how to maintain multiple relationships, while lying to everyone involved. The divorce papers were filed. Fastest dissolution in state history, according to Francine. Fraud invalidated everything. The marriage was void. I'd never legally been her husband in the way that mattered. Just a victim of identity theft who'd happened to have a ceremony. Nathan's relationship had no legal standing. He couldn't even file for separation. Just had to walk away. We both had to rebuild from nothing. The house went into foreclosure. Neither of us could afford it alone. The credit card debt was contested. I was fighting to prove I hadn't authorized the accounts. Nathan was trying to recover his $60,000 through civil court. We'd formed an alliance, the two men Lillian had destroyed, supporting each other through the aftermath. The trial date was set. Lillian was released from the psychiatric facility, deemed competent to stand trial. She'd gained weight, cut her hair short, looked different, looked like a stranger. Her lawyer tried multiple delays, all denied. The judge said this case was unusual enough to warrant expedited proceedings, that the public interest was significant, that both victims deserved resolution. I'd never thought of myself as a victim. Had always been the strong one, the capable one. Now I was a victim. Of fraud, of emotional abuse, of systematic deception. It was humiliating and accurate. The media circus intensified as trial approached. Reporters camped outside my apartment, outside Nathan's new place, outside the courthouse. We'd become a spectacle. The two husbands. Some outlets were sympathetic, framed us as victims of an elaborate con. Others were cruel, questioned our masculinity, our intelligence. How could two grown men not know they were sharing a wife? The comments on articles were worse. People saying we must have been terrible husbands if she needed someone else. People saying we were clearly in on it, that this was some elaborate insurance scam. The conspiracy theories were endless, none of them based in reality, all of them making our pain into entertainment. I stopped reading news coverage, stopped checking social media. My therapist said that was healthy, that I needed to focus on healing, not public opinion. But it was hard. My face was everywhere, my name, my story. Strangers approached me in grocery stores, some sympathetic, some curious, some cruel. One woman told me I should write a book, make money from the situation. I told her I just wanted my life back. She said that wasn't possible, that I'd be defined by this forever. She was right. I'd always be the man whose wife had a secret second husband. That would be my story, my identity. Nothing I accomplished would matter as much as this failure to notice I was being deceived. Nathan and I started meeting weekly, support system, only person who understood. We'd have dinner, not talk about Lillian, talk about rebuilding, jobs, therapy, dating eventually. He'd tried going on one date. The woman had recognized him halfway through appetizers, made an excuse and left. He'd paid the check and gone home, deleted all his dating apps, said it was too soon, that nobody wanted to date the man from the news. I hadn't tried, couldn't imagine trusting someone, couldn't imagine believing anything anyone told me. My therapist said that would take time, that I'd been traumatized, that trust would return slowly. If I did the work, I was doing the work, showing up to therapy, taking the medication. Trying to sleep. It wasn't working yet, but I was trying. The preliminary hearing was packed, media everywhere. Nathan and I sat together, united front. Lillian didn't look at either of us, stared straight ahead while her lawyer argued for dismissal based on mental illness. The judge wasn't buying it, said mental illness didn't excuse years of calculated fraud, that Lillian had maintained employment, finances, 2 households, that she'd demonstrated capacity for complex planning, that arguing she was too mentally ill to be responsible was inconsistent with the evidence. The case would proceed, trial in 6 weeks. We spent those 6 weeks preparing. Nathan and I had depositions, gave statements, provided documentation, bank records, text messages, photos. 8 years of evidence that we'd been living real lives with Lillian while she'd been performing. The prosecutor was good, a man named Thomas Wu. He'd handled white-collar crime for a decade, said this was personal fraud of the highest order, that Lillian had stolen identities, money, and years from 2 people, that the sentence should reflect the sustained nature of the crime. He was asking for 15 years. Francine thought he'd get 8. Nathan's lawyer thought less. Everyone agreed prison was likely. The prosecution played the therapy live streams, all 49 minutes. The courtroom watched Lillian explain how she'd managed 2 marriages, the compartmentalization, the lies, the planning. Nathan and I watched it again. Still painful, still surreal. Watching your wife explain that your marriage was a performance. That nothing had been real. That she'd loved you in a way but not the right way. The jury looked shocked, horrified. One woman was crying. The judge called for a recess. We reconvened an hour later. Lillian's lawyer tried to object to the videos as prejudicial. The judge overruled, said Lillian had created and distributed the videos herself, that they were evidence of state of mind and intent. Lillian took the stand, testified that she'd been mentally ill, that she'd created elaborate fantasies as coping mechanisms, that she'd believed both relationships were real but separate, that she'd convinced herself this was normal, that she'd been in denial about the harm. Her lawyer walked her through the childhood trauma story: absent father, narcissistic mother, need for validation from multiple sources. The prosecutor destroyed her on cross-examination, pointed out the planning, the fake accounts, the stolen money, the storage unit, said this wasn't dissociation, this was calculation, asked how mentally ill people managed color-coded calendars. Lillian had no good answer, cried, said she was sorry, that she'd never wanted to hurt us. The prosecutor said wanting not to hurt someone was different from actively deceiving them for 8 years. She had no response. Nathan testified, talked about the $60,000, the fake medical bills, the commitment ceremony, the 6 proposals, the way Lillian had strung him along while being legally married to me. He cried on the stand, said he'd loved her completely, that he'd planned a life with her, children, growing old together, that finding out it was all lies had destroyed him. That he couldn't trust anyone anymore, that he'd been in therapy 3 times a week since the live stream, that he'd lost 30 pounds from stress, that his students had seen the news coverage, that his principal had suggested he take a leave of absence, that his life was ruined. The jury watched him fall apart. Several jurors cried with him. The prosecutor asked Nathan to describe the commitment ceremony in Vermont. Nathan's voice broke. He said they'd gone to a bed and breakfast, small place in the mountains, just the 2 of them and an officiant Lillian had found online. She'd worn a white dress, he'd worn a suit. They'd written their own vows. She'd promised to love him forever, to be faithful, to build a life together. She'd cried when she said it. He'd believed every word. They'd spent the weekend in Vermont like a honeymoon. She'd called it their real wedding, said the legal stuff didn't matter. What mattered was their commitment to each other. He'd believed that too. Had felt married in all the ways that counted. Came home and told his family he'd gotten married. They'd thrown a party. His mother had cried happy tears. His father had welcomed Lillian to the family. None of them knew she'd been legally married to me for 5 years at that point. None of them knew Vermont had been a long weekend while I'd thought she was at a work conference in Boston. The prosecutor showed photos from the Vermont ceremony. Lillian smiling, looking genuinely happy. Nathan looking at her like she was his entire world. The prosecutor asked if Nathan had suspected anything. Nathan said no. Never. She'd been perfect, attentive, loving, present. When she was with him, she was completely there. No phone distractions, no distracted energy. He'd thought he had all of her. The prosecutor asked about the $60,000. Nathan explained it had been increments. $5,000 here, $10,000 there. Always for her mother's medical bills. Procedures not covered by insurance. Experimental treatments. He'd given it willingly. Wanted to help. Lillian had shown him fake bills, hospital letterhead, detailed procedures. He'd never thought to verify. Why would he? She was his wife in every way that mattered. You don't fact-check your wife's dying mother, except her mother wasn't dying, was healthy. The money had gone somewhere else. Neither Nathan nor the investigators had figured out where. The defense attorney cross-examined Nathan aggressively. Tried to establish that Nathan had known about me, that this was consensual polyamory gone wrong. Nathan shut it down, said he'd never heard my name until the live stream, never knew Lillian was married. The defense attorney showed Nathan's social media, pointed out that Lillian had never posted photos of them together, asked if that wasn't suspicious. Nathan said she'd told him she was private. Didn't like social media. He'd respected that. Thought it was refreshing. The defense attorney asked about weekends and holidays. Why Nathan had never questioned her absences. Nathan said she'd always had reasons. Work trips. Family obligations. He'd trusted her. The defense attorney implied Nathan had been willfully blind, that he'd chosen not to see what was obvious. Nathan said nothing had been obvious. That Lillian had been an expert liar. That you can't see deception when it's executed perfectly? The prosecutor objected. Judge sustained. But the damage was done. The defense had planted doubt, made it seem like maybe Nathan should have known. I testified last. Talked about the marriage, the anniversary dinners, the house we'd bought, the plans we'd made, the way she'd stolen my identity to fund a life I didn't know about, the humiliation of my entire family watching her confess, the way I couldn't sleep anymore, couldn't eat, couldn't function. The prosecutor asked if I'd loved her. I said yes. He asked if I still did. I said I loved who I thought she was. That person had never existed. So no, I didn't love her. I loved a fiction. The jury took notes. Lillian cried. I didn't look at her. Couldn't. Looked at the jury instead. Saw sympathy. Saw anger. Saw people who understood this wasn't a mistake. This was systematic abuse. The prosecutor walked me through the anniversary dinner, 2 nights before the live stream. I'd made reservations months in advance. Same restaurant as our first date. I'd gotten there early, had them put rose petals on the table, champagne waiting. She'd arrived right on time, wearing the dress I loved, the blue one she'd worn on our honeymoon. We'd talked for 3 hours, about our future, about maybe trying for kids, about growing old together. She'd held my hand across the table, told me I was the best thing that ever happened to her. I'd believed her, given her the bracelet, engraved with our wedding date and forever yours. She'd cried, real tears, or I'd thought they were real. Now I knew she'd been crying because she'd already planned the live stream. Already decided to destroy everything. The anniversary dinner had been her farewell, her last performance. I'd been too stupid to see it. The prosecutor asked about the credit cards. I explained I'd found out about them after the live stream. $82,000 in debt I didn't know about. Cards opened in my name. She'd been forging my signature, using my information. I'd checked my credit report weekly before we got married. Stopped after. Thought I could trust my wife. The debt had accumulated over 3 years. She'd been making minimum payments from an account I didn't know existed, keeping the balances just low enough to avoid default. When I'd discovered them, I'd felt violated. Raped financially. That was the word my therapist used. Financial rape. Taking something without consent. Using my identity, my credit, my future. For purposes I'd never approved. The prosecutor asked how it made me feel. I said it made me feel stupid, naive, like I'd failed at the most basic level of adult functioning. Protect yourself. I hadn't. I'd trusted completely. That trust had been weaponized against me. The defense attorney tried to paint me as controlling, asked if I'd monitored Lillian's spending. I said no. We'd had separate accounts and one joint account for household expenses. She'd had complete financial independence. He asked if I'd questioned her work trips. I said no. She was a sales director. Travel was part of her job. He asked if I'd ever checked her phone. I said no. That would be a violation of privacy. He asked if I'd ever suspected infidelity. I said no. Never. Not once. He asked why. I said because she'd never given me a reason. She'd been present. Affectionate. Engaged. Everything had seemed fine. He asked if fine wasn't concerning. If passion shouldn't have ups and downs. I said our relationship had been stable. Healthy. I'd thought that was good. He implied stability was boring. That maybe Lillian had needed more excitement. The prosecutor objected. Judge sustained. But again the seed was planted. Maybe I'd been inadequate. Maybe I'd driven her to this. The closing arguments took 3 hours. Lillian's lawyer argued mental illness, diminished capacity, need for treatment, not punishment. The prosecutor argued calculated fraud, years of planning, 2 victims destroyed, financial crimes, identity theft, emotional abuse. He said Lillian had made choices every single day for 8 years, choices to lie, to steal, to deceive, that she'd chosen her comfort over our humanity. That she'd treated us like props in her elaborate performance, that she deserved the maximum sentence for the maximum betrayal. The jury deliberated for 7 hours, came back with guilty verdicts on all counts: fraud, identity theft, bigamy, theft by deception. Lillian collapsed. Her lawyer caught her. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks. The sentencing hearing was shorter. Lillian's lawyer made a final plea for leniency. The judge wasn't moved, said this was one of the most egregious cases of intimate partner fraud he'd seen in 30 years on the bench, that Lillian had demonstrated sophisticated planning and zero remorse until caught, that the livestream had been a final act of cruelty, broadcasting our private pain. The judge sentenced her to 12 years, could be reduced to 8 with good behavior, restitution ordered. Both Nathan and I would receive compensation from her assets, what little remained. The court would also help clear the fraudulent debts. It was something, not justice exactly, but something. Nathan and I left the courthouse together, media shouting questions. We didn't answer. Got in his car, drove to the same coffee shop where we'd first met, ordered drinks, sat in silence. Finally, he said we should stay in touch, that we were the only 2 people who understood what this felt like. I agreed. We'd been through something nobody else could comprehend. Shared victimhood created strange bonds. We exchanged real contact information, promised to check in. He said he was moving, couldn't stay in the city where everything reminded him of her. I said I understood, was considering the same. We hugged goodbye. 2 strangers who'd become accidental brothers through shared trauma. 6 months later, I was rebuilding. New apartment. Returned to work. Started dating someone who knew everything up front. No secrets, no surprises. She appreciated the honesty even when it was brutal. Nathan texted occasionally. Updates from his new city, new teaching job, new therapist who specialized in betrayal trauma. He sounded better, hopeful. Said he was learning to trust again, slowly. I was trying to do the same. The news cycle had moved on. We were old news. Occasionally someone recognized me, made a joke. I'd learned to smile and walk away. Confrontation didn't help. Nothing helped except time and distance. The woman I was dating was named Sophie. She was a graphic designer, divorced, no kids. She'd found my story online before our first date. Done her research. Decided to meet me anyway. I appreciated that. The conscious choice to see past the scandal. Our first date, I'd been nervous. Waiting for the moment she'd realize I was damaged, broken. Too much work. She'd been patient, asked questions about what I needed, what I was comfortable with. We'd taken it slow. No talk of moving in together, no assumptions about the future, just present moment, seeing where things went. After 6 months, she still hadn't run. That felt like something. Nathan had met someone too, a librarian named Marcus. They'd connected over books. Marcus had never heard of the case, didn't follow news, lived quietly. When Nathan finally told him, Marcus had been understanding, said everyone had a past. What mattered was who you were now. Nathan said it felt too good to be true. That he kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Marcus to turn out to be lying about something fundamental. I understood that. The hypervigilance, the inability to take anything at face value. My therapist said it would fade eventually, that not everyone was Lillian. Most people told the truth most of the time. I wanted to believe that. Wasn't there yet, but wanted to be. Work had been surprisingly understanding. My boss had pulled me aside after I returned, said take whatever time I needed, said my performance before all this had been excellent, that one personal crisis didn't define my professional value. It helped. Having something I was still good at. Something Lillian hadn't contaminated. I threw myself into projects, worked late, took on extra assignments. My coworkers were kind, didn't ask invasive questions. Treated me normally, or as normally as possible when everyone had seen your wife's therapy session. The accounting department had sent a card. Simple message. We're glad you're back. It had made me cry. First time I'd cried in months. Relief, maybe. That kindness still existed. That not everyone saw me as a victim or a joke. Some people just saw me as a colleague who'd had a hard time. I'd started painting. Never done it before. Therapists suggested finding a creative outlet for processing. I'd bought supplies, cheap stuff from a craft store, set up in my apartment living room, painted abstract shapes, colors, nothing representational, just emotion on canvas. It helped, gave my hands something to do, my mind something to focus on that wasn't the past. I wasn't good at it. Didn't matter. Wasn't about being good. Was about expression. Release. Sophie had asked to see them once. I'd been embarrassed. She'd looked at each one carefully, said they were raw, honest, that she could see pain in them, but also color, also light. Said that meant something. That I was healing, even if it didn't feel like it yet. I drove past the house once. Our house. Or what I'd thought was our house. New owners. They'd repainted. The garden looked different, better maintained. They were building something real there, on the foundation of my lies. I felt nothing looking at it. No nostalgia, no anger, just emptiness, where something important used to be. I drove away and didn't look back. Some buildings couldn't be salvaged, had to be demolished and rebuilt. I was doing the same with my life, tearing down everything Lillian had constructed, finding what was real underneath. It was less than I'd hoped, more than I'd feared. It was mine. The anniversary passed, 8 years since the wedding, 1 year since the live stream. Nathan texted, asked if I was okay. I said I was surviving. He said same. We'd both thought about reaching out to each other all day, both hesitated. Both eventually did. There was comfort in that. In knowing someone else remembered. Someone else marked time by the same devastating moment. We made plans to meet for coffee. Annual tradition, maybe. The club nobody wanted to join. Members for life. Not because we chose it, because Lillian had chosen for us. She'd given us each other. The only gift she'd ever given that was real. 2 shattered men learning to exist in the aftermath. 2 lives rebuilt from systematic destruction. It wasn't what either of us had planned 8 years ago. But it was what we had. And somehow that was enough. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.